Hi, welcome to our course website for Creation Theology and the Bible texts, reality, and interpretations. We're going to have a great time this summer session, and here's kind of the layout of what we got planned. First, we're going to have we have 10 modules worked out in the virtual learning community. And we're going to spend the first 3 of those, modules 1 to 3, and the first face-to-face session talking about creation theology in the context of other Old Testament theologies. We're going to start with Old Testament. We'll have our face-to-face session on May 31 this year, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. That's a Saturday at the seminary, and face-to-face time. It should be great, high-energy experience. Then we'll move on to looking more closely at a number of other elements related to creation theology in the Old Testament, or the elements of creation theology in the Old Testament. In the first part, we're looking at creation theology in the context of the rest of the theologies of the Old Testament. And then here in these, in modules 4 to 6, we're actually going deeply into creation theology and the elements that make it up. And then we'll move on into study of creation theology as those ideas are developed in texts from Second Temple times. They're in a so-called intertestamental period. And it turns out that ideas first developed in the Old Testament find further expression and development in those texts, and they're taken up then into New Testament texts in very interesting ways. Finally then, when we come together in our final session, well, in preparation for our final session, we'll begin working on texts in the New Testament, and then finally we'll come for our final face-to-face session on July 19 at the seminary as well. So we got some great textbooks to read. 2 of them are required. William Brown's textbook on the 7 pillars of creation, and Terence Fretheim's work on God and the World in the Old Testament, a relational theology of creation. We'll read quite a bit of those books, so much so that it'll necessitate that each of us buy a copy of the book, though I will provide readings in PDFs to facilitate. We have some other books from which we'll be reading some sections. Catherine Schiffendecker's book, Out of the Whirlwind, Creation Theology in the Book of Job, is really good, and we'll read some sections from that. And also from Klaus Westermann's work on creation. The module cycle is the dance that we're going to do week by week through the 10 weeks of the summer semester. I'll begin each weekly module by posing a question. It's going to get you thinking about kind of globally, and then you're going to go read some stuff, and we're going to address this question through the course of our work during the week. I'll have a little video for you to watch that kind of frames up the issue and get us started. And then you'll do a few days of individual work. That usually will involve 2 inductive studies, and you'll upload that work to the course website, and then we'll get you some feedback on that work back to you individually. And then we'll launch into the back part of the module cycle, which is a group discussion in which we work on our thinking, pulling things together, relating our reading, our inductive studies to this larger question. So I'll pose once again that integrative question. You'll do an initial post marked with a certain kind of set of characteristics with substance and citing both secondary literature and the primary text that we've studied. And then we'll do this kind of free-for-all in which we're pushing one another's thinking and refining our thinking together. And then you'll do a final post just before Monday. Our cycles go Tuesday through Monday evening, so Tuesday morning through Monday midnight, and you see then your final post will be by Monday midnight. Then I'll give some feedback to you individually on that work, and then direct some comments to the entire group, both on the issue of content of our thinking and then also the process of our work together. So that's kind of the dance we're going to do that's going to keep us going in virtual learning community through the course of the class. We'll have an exam during the first face-to-face session, and I know that word exam strikes fear into us, but it doesn't have to be. It's going to be a real interesting thing about the elements of theology in the Old Testament. If you've had the Old Testament introduction course with me the second semester, this is the same exam. It's kind of a starting point for getting going on theology of the Old Testament. So I've got a list and a study guide that will identify what these elements of Old Testament theology are, and your job is to prepare 4 or 5 bullet points that summarize the main points of those theological elements in the Old Testament, and then prepare with that study guide during the first 3 modules leading up to our first face-to-face session. So we've got plenty of time to sort of prepare for it, and you'll know exactly what you're supposed to be doing. You'll have resources to figure it out. When we get to our first face-to-face, well, the first thing we'll do is not take the exam, but instead do some review on the exam. Then finally, late in the morning, we'll take the exam and get it sort of done. What that will do is get into RAM a set of ideas that will prove to be very, very important for us as we continue our work through the course of the summer. One of the other elements you're going to do for the course is report. You're going to do a report on some aspect of creation theology. So you're going to select an aspect of creation theology in the Bible. You're going to identify and master texts related to that topic. You're going to incorporate secondary sources. You're going to read what some scholars have to say about stuff and commentaries and so on. Then you'll prepare an outline of your presentation in which you identify what those texts are. You trace the developments of the theology in the Bible, and then relate those biblical ideas and categories to ideas about creation in our modern world. Then this presentation is going to be made to the rest of us. It's going to be done on PowerPoint, not as a written paper, but in PowerPoint or Prezi if you prefer that mode of presentation. And you'll deliver them to one another and to all of us at the final face-to-face session, July 19. Topics are just all kinds of them. There's too many here to go over, but got all kinds of ideas for you. And if there's one on the list that you don't see and you can convince me that it belongs in there, I'll sure be glad to work with you on that. So we are a virtual learning community. This is a hybrid course in which a good portion of our learning is going to be carried out in what's called virtual learning community. That means you are simultaneously, we're the learners, we're the object of the learning, but we're also the medium of the learning. And it means that it's not like a face-to-face classroom where you kind of are the consumer and I'm the deliverer of content, and it's just not how the sociology of learning happens in this kind of a medium. It calls for each of us to step up and become a part of a community in which we're contributing to one another's thinking, the development of our thinking in certain kinds of ways, and we'll sketch it out as we go, but it means that we take, all of us, a certain level of responsibility for the learning environment, and so you're going to help make the environment what it is, and that'll be a great part of it here. So some preliminary questions to be thinking about. By what sort of processes did created order come into being? And what difference does that make for our understanding of creation? Where are humans located in the created order, and how do they relate to other elements in creation? And what's our role? What does the Creator want out of creation? Not just from humans, but from all that's been created. And particularly in the New Testament then, what is Christ's role in creation, and how does this affect the call of Christians today? I'm excited about this course. I just think we're going to have a great time together, and there's such good material for us to do. So welcome, and we're going to have a great time.